After the First Crusade, 4 Crusader states arose in the Middle East. Jerusalem remained under Christian rule, serving as the Crusaders' capital for almost a century, until the Muslims eventually exacted their revenge. The first ruler of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was Godfrey of Bouillon, who initially held the title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Within his new territories, he implemented a feudal system common in Europe. He then granted land to the knights in his army, who pledged their vassal allegiance to him. However, most Crusaders returned to Europe after reclaiming Jerusalem, as they had successfully fulfilled their sacred vow. Those who chose to remain began to establish their own domains. Thus, in 1099, Tancred of Taranto conquered Galilee, forming his own principality, but he swore fealty to Godfrey, making Tancred's lands part of the greater kingdom of Jerusalem. Godfrey's reign was brief. He passed away the following year while trying to capture coastal cities along the Mediterranean. His brother, Baldwin I, then the Count of Edessa, ascended as the new king of Jerusalem. Unlike Godfrey, Baldwin wasn't known for modesty and claimed the full title of king. Baldwin I proved to be a skillful politician when he shrewdly deposed the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Dagobert of Pisa, who aimed to create a theocratic rule in the city, similar to Rome's papal states. Baldwin I dedicated nearly his entire reign to expanding the kingdom's territories. In 1101, he captured the cities his brother had intended to take. In 1104, he seized Acre, a city crucial for the Kingdom of Jerusalem, as its port would generate significant revenue for the treasury in the years to come. Baldwin solidified his conquests through 3 decisive battles at Ramla. Despite a Crusader defeat in the second engagement, 2 victories were enough to compel the Fatimid Caliphate to relinquish its claims over the lost territories. Baldwin I then turned his attention to resolving internal conflicts among the Crusaders. In 1109, the King of Jerusalem successfully united them to conquer the lands of Lebanon, which obstructed the overland route from Byzantium. During this campaign, Baldwin I annexed Beirut to his kingdom, while the remainder of Lebanon was incorporated into the country of Tripoli. Baldwin I also captured Sidon with assistance from Norwegians, who had embarked on a brief crusade but soon returned home. In 1115, Baldwin I claimed territories on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, even reaching the Red Sea, effectively severing Egypt and Syria from each other. The first king of Jerusalem died in 1118 during a campaign in Egypt, having advanced to the Nile Delta. His successor was the Count of Edessa, his companion Baldwin II of Borg. With crucial Venetian aid, he managed to complete the conquest of coastal cities. He attempted to seize Aleppo and Damascus but failed, resulting in his captivity for 2 years. Even after his release, Baldwin II continued his campaigns in Syria, although they were now limited to raiding Muslim cities. Baldwin II designated his grandson, Baldwin II, as his successor. However, since Baldwin II was still a minor, power transferred to his daughter Melisande and her husband Fulk. They were crowned alongside the young king, Baldwin II. Melisande was renowned for her generosity and sharp political mind, earning her subjects deep affection. In stark contrast, her husband Fulk frequently interfered in his baron's affairs. A series of military defeats Fulk endured against the Muslims during his rule further eroded his popularity. The kingdom was only saved from civil war by his unexpected death in 1143. In 1098, Bohemond became the Prince of Antioch. He also aimed to expand his territories but with less success. In 1100, he suffered a defeat at the Battle of Melitene and was captured by the Turks for 3 years. Upon his release, he journeyed back to Europe, enlisted volunteers, and set out to fight once more, though this time his target was the Byzantines, not the Muslims. In 1108, he was defeated at Dyrrhachium and negotiated peace with the emperor, agreeing to cede Antioch to Byzantium. Nevertheless, in Antioch itself, where his nephew Tancred governed in his absence, this agreement was not recognized. Tancred himself proved more adept at expanding the principality's borders. In 1104, he captured Edessa, while its count was held captive by the Turks. A year later, at the Battle of Arda, he defeated the Emir of Aleppo and pushed the principality's eastern frontiers significantly. In 1108, Tancred seized Latakia from the Byzantines and, at the Battle of Turbessel, defeated Baldwin of Bourg, the Count of Edessa and future King of Jerusalem, when he attempted to reclaim his county. It wasn't until 1111, under threat of excommunication, that Tancred returned Edessa to Baldwin. Tancred also made efforts to capture the county of Tripoli and lands held by the Sicilian Armenians, but his early death from typhus in 1112 halted these ambitions. His successor, Roger of Salerno, in 1119, was defeated by the Turks at the Battle of Bouillon, also known as the Battle of the Blood Field. The Crusaders incurred heavy losses, severely weakening the power of the Principality of Antioch. Consequently, the rulers of Antioch became dependent on either Jerusalem or Byzantium. Raymond IV of Toulouse did not receive territory in Palestine and instead served in Byzantium. There he encountered new crusaders, primarily those who had delayed joining the First Crusade, or those who had fled from it. In Europe, they were branded as cowards, prompting them to embark on a campaign known historically as the Crusade of the Faint-Hearted. They advanced with 3 separate armies. Raymond joined this campaign as a guide, but his advice was disregarded, and all 3 armies were defeated by the Turks in Anatolia. With the remnants of these crusaders, Raymond fought his way to Antioch, where he decided to establish his own county. He captured Tortosa, then unsuccessfully besieged Tripoli, during which he sustained a fatal wound. Soon after, his forces managed to capture Acre, effectively cutting off Tripoli from the rest of the Muslim world. Nevertheless, the city maintained maritime connections with Egypt and had no intention of surrendering. Raymond's son Bertrand captured it only in 1109 with the assistance of the King of Jerusalem, Baldwin I. The county of Tripoli was the smallest of the Crusader states. However, it benefited from protection by the mountains of Lebanon. To secure the mountain passes, the renowned Croc de Chevalier Castle was constructed, which still stands today. But these mountain fortresses were not solely occupied by the Crusaders. In the fortress of Masyaf, the Order of Assassins established themselves, notorious for assassinating neighboring rulers. The rulers of Tripoli frequently faced threats from such neighbors, and Count Raymond II was eventually assassinated by them. Following this event, Tripoli fell under the influence of Jerusalem. The county of Edessa, the very first Crusader state, was the most remote from Jerusalem, making it highly vulnerable. During his tenure as Count of Edessa, Baldwin of Bouillon actively expanded his territory's borders. Some lands were conquered, while others, such as the Emirate of Samosata, were acquired through purchase. In 1100, he even assisted the Emir of Aleppo in suppressing a rebellion, for which he received a monetary reward. When his brother Godfrey passed away in 1101 and Baldwin ascended to become King of Jerusalem, he transferred Edessa to his companion, Baldwin of Bourg. The new Count of Edessa then extended its borders eastward. Although his attempt to capture the city of Haran in 1104 proved unsuccessful, and Baldwin of Bourg was captured by the Atabeg of Mosul, it was at this point that the ruler of Antioch, Tancred, occupied his county and refused to return it. Even after Baldwin was released from captivity, Baldwin then rallied troops, including Muslim mercenaries, but was defeated at the Battle of Turbessel. Only in 1111 did Baldwin of Bourg finally regain Edessa. In 1118, he became King of Jerusalem, known as Baldwin II. Meanwhile, Edessa passed to the Courtenay family. Jocelyn I de Courtenay pledged vassalage to the new King of Jerusalem and participated in all his military campaigns. His son, Jocelyn II, while also swearing fealty, pursued a more independent foreign policy. Ultimately, this approach became the cause of his downfall. In 1144, he formed an alliance with the Turkish Bey Kara Arslan, who was actively engaged in conflict against the Mosul Atabeg Zengi, and went to his aid. During this critical time, Zengi commenced a siege of Edessa, pledged allegiance to the new monarch of Jerusalem, and joined in all his military campaigns. His son, Jocelyn II, despite also making an oath of loyalty, chose to follow a less dependent approach. Ultimately, this decision led to his ruin. In the year 1144, he entered into a pact with the Turkish leader Kara Arslan, who at that moment was engaged in conflict with Zengi, the Atabeg of Mosul, and he went to offer assistance. Around this same period, Zengi initiated a siege on the city of Edessa. As the city faced a siege, its ruler anxiously awaited a Crusader relief force. Nevertheless, these reinforcements never arrived because the Prince of Antioch, who had a recent disagreement with Jocelyn II, deliberately stopped Crusaders on their way to assist Edessa. The successful capture of Edessa significantly boosted the reputation of Atabeg Zengi, and Muslim leaders who believed he could defeat the Crusaders began to rally around him. This consolidation of Muslim power continued even after Zengi's demise, with his son Nur ad-Din carrying on his father's ambitions. Word of Edessa's downfall galvanized the crusading fervor back in Europe. Clergymen actively urged the populace to embark on another crusade. Among these influential figures was Bernard of Clairvaux. Both France's King Louis VI and Emperor Conrad I pledged to join this upcoming crusade. They commenced their journey toward the Middle East in the year 1147. Conrad I was the first to reach Byzantium, subsequently advancing into Anatolia, where his forces suffered a devastating loss against the Turks at the Battle of Dorylaeum. Following his return to Constantinople, he then set sail for Palestine. The French monarch also attempted a land route, enduring casualties from minor clashes with Turkish forces. He consequently hired a Byzantine ship and also journeyed to Antioch. In the spring of 1148, the Crusaders reached Acre, where they were welcomed by Queen Regent Melisande. A crucial issue for the campaign became apparent during a military assembly in Acre. The Crusaders found themselves unable to reach a consensus. Some advocated for recapturing Edessa, others wished to advance on Aleppo, while the Queen of Jerusalem proposed seizing Ascalon. Ultimately, a compromise was reached. They would march towards Damascus. The complexity arose because Damascus was, at that period, an ally of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, as it was also contending with the Atabeg Nur ad-Din of Mosul. Despite the presence of young King Baldwin II leading the expedition, many of his own nobles declined to participate. The Crusader army proved incapable of taking Damascus. 4 continuous days of assaults on the city's defenses resulted in substantial casualties. Accusing one another of betrayal, the participants of the Second Crusade began to abandon the siege of Damascus, and by the spring of 1149, their presence in the Kingdom of Jerusalem had entirely ceased. This unsuccessful endeavor cost the Crusaders dearly, not only in human lives but also allowed Damascus to fall under the dominion of Atabeg Nur ad-Din, who continued his efforts to unify Muslims against the Crusaders. Queen Melisande resisted relinquishing authority to her son Baldwin III for an extended period. He was compelled to instigate a revolt to ultimately assume control of his realm. He consequently sent his mother to a religious cloister and then devoted his attention to military strategies. Baldwin successfully captured Ascalon, and a few years later, he managed to defeat Nur ad-Din, compelling him to negotiate a peace treaty with the Crusaders. In this manner, the Kingdom of Jerusalem reached the zenith of its influence. A persistent challenge for the Kingdom of Jerusalem was its insufficient troop numbers. Even during its most prosperous times, the Jerusalemite king could muster no more than 20,000 fighting men. A significant advantage was that approximately 5,000 of these were heavily armed knights on horseback, recognized as the most formidable combatants of that era. Nevertheless, this was never quite enough. The scarcity of manpower was so extreme that even the Patriarch of Jerusalem and Christian religious houses had to fund soldiers to serve the kingdom. Another strategy to augment the military involved knightly orders. The inaugural order of this kind emerged in 1113, originating from the Hospital of St. John in Jerusalem. known as the Order of the Hospitallers. A more prominent order was the Knights Templar, established in 1119 by veterans of the First Crusade. Both of these orders functioned essentially as independent entities within the Kingdom of Jerusalem. They possessed their own financial resources, supported by contributions from pilgrims, along with extensive landholdings that at times rendered them more influential than typical feudal lords. The aforementioned Croix de Chevalier Castle was property of the Hospitallers. The governmental framework of the Kingdom of Jerusalem mirrored that of a typical feudal system. Settlers from Western Europe, comprising knights and feudal landowners, were granted all the territories and governing authority. In return, they were obligated to provide military support. The indigenous population, consisting of Greeks, Armenians, Assyrians, and Arabs, who constituted the majority of inhabitants in these regions, became indentured serfs or peasants. They cultivated the lord's estates in exchange for leases of land for their personal cultivation. The knights were not entirely disconnected from the local Christian populace. They engaged in active collaboration with them. European feudal lords frequently appointed local Armenians and Greeks to significant governmental roles. Marriages between Europeans and local Christian aristocracy were also commonplace. Offspring from these unions were designated as poulins. By the middle of the 12th century, these poulins would form the bedrock of the local noble class. The Muslim populace within the Kingdom of Jerusalem experienced minimal alterations. The sole notable distinction was their obligation to pay an additional tax, comparable to how Christians were taxed in Muslim territories. For adherents of Islam, this levy was not excessively burdensome. The Arab traveler Ibn Jubair even noted that Arab farmers frequently relocated from conflict-ridden Muslim principalities to the Crusader states, as their livelihoods were often more comfortable in those lands. Commerce thrived within the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The initial monarchs granted special trading rights to Italian merchants, and Baldwin III went so far as to waive taxes for them, thereby securing trade advantages. This action substantially boosted commerce with European nations. Meanwhile, the royal coffers were replenished by tariffs collected from the caravans of Arab traders, as the trade artery connecting Africa and Asia traversed the territories of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Baldwin III's strategies for consolidating his influence included forging a pact with the Byzantine Empire. He convened with Emperor Emmanuel I in Antioch, and both parties reached an agreement for an alliance to combat Muslim forces. However, Baldwin II's untimely demise prevented the execution of these strategic objectives. The throne was subsequently assumed by his younger brother, Amalric. Amalric initiated 4 military expeditions into Egypt. During his inaugural campaign in 1163, he vanquished the Fatimid armies at the Battle of Al-Babain and compelled Egypt to submit tribute to Jerusalem. His second invasion occurred the subsequent year, where Amalric partnered with the Egyptian vizier to oppose Nur ad-Din. Alongside Fatimid troops, the Crusaders besieged Shirkuh's forces near Bilbais and compelled their surrender. Nevertheless, this triumph proved to be ephemeral, as Amalric I received intelligence that Nur ad-Din had initiated an assault on Antioch and captured the Antiochian prince during the Battle of Harim. The king of Jerusalem was compelled to hastily return to safeguard his kingdom. Amalric I's third military foray into Egypt was provoked by Shirkuh's renewed invasion. On this occasion, the Muslim forces inflicted a significant defeat upon the Crusaders at the Battle of Al-Babain. Despite this, Shirkuh was unable to exploit his victory. He managed to take Alexandria, but there, he and his contingent found themselves encircled by a combined force of Fatimid and Crusader soldiers. Ultimately, Shirkuh was compelled to capitulate once more. Before departing for Jerusalem, Amalric I stationed a garrison in Alexandria to preserve his regional influence. In 1168, Amalric launched his fourth invasion of Egypt with the explicit aim of its complete conquest. He easily seized Bilbao, after which he advanced northward and initiated a siege of Damietta. The Byzantine navy provided support from the sea, but they were unsuccessful in capturing the city, forcing the king of Jerusalem to withdraw. In 1173, following Nur ad-Din's passing, Amalric of Ice embarked on an unsuccessful campaign against Damascus. Upon his return, he contracted dysentery and succumbed to the illness the following year, in 1174. During Amalric I's Fourth Egyptian campaign, Nur ad-Din's commander, Shirkuh, arrived with the objective of conquering the region. While the Crusaders were engaged in the siege of Damietta, Shirkuh routed the Fatimid armies, ordered the execution of Vizier Shawar, and assumed direct control of Egypt. His authority was inherited by his nephew Saladin, also recognized as Saladin, who proclaimed himself the Sultan of Egypt. This development ignited a conflict with Nur ad-Din, who regarded Saladin as his subordinate. Still, Nur ad-Din passed away merely 2 years later, and Saladin assumed command of his dominion. From that moment forward, Saladin's territories almost encircled the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Furthermore, he successfully united the majority of Muslim leaders under his authority, assembling a formidable military force that contemporary records estimated at approximately 100,000 troops. The Muslims were now prepared to initiate an assault on the Crusader territories. Saladin encountered resistance from the young monarch, Baldwin V. Since his youth, Baldwin had been afflicted with leprosy, a condition that intensified through the years. He commanded significantly fewer soldiers than Saladin, and with no additional support arriving from Europe, his subjects doubted the king's capacity to safeguard Jerusalem from Saladin. The highest religious leader of Jerusalem, Patriarch Heraclius, even journeyed to Europe seeking a more suitable individual for the throne. Indeed, precisely as Saladin was amassing his troops in Aleppo for an expedition targeting Jerusalem, King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem conducted a surprise raid on Damascus, plundering the city. This unexpected action caught Saladin off guard, prompting him to agree to a peace accord with the Crusaders. The war resumed a year later. On this occasion, King Baldwin IV personally confronted Saladin in the engagement at Mongisard. The Crusader forces executed a flanking maneuver against the Muslim army attacking from the rear. Saladin barely avoided perishing in the clash, and his army dispersed. This defeat seriously diminished Saladin's influence, and his own commanders started to revolt against him. Despite experiencing several minor triumphs over the Crusaders, he was compelled to enter into a ceasefire agreement with Baldwin IV. The truce was violated once more 2 years later. absolution from King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. In 1156, he launched a raid on the Byzantine island of Cyprus and was compelled to seek forgiveness from the Byzantine emperor. For a period, de Chatillon paused his aggressive actions due to a 16-year imprisonment amongst the Muslims. During this internment, Reynaud lost his authority in Antioch. Nevertheless, upon his return to Jerusalem, he wed the widow of the Baron of Carac Castle. On his newly acquired territories, Reynaud de Chatillon resumed attacking Arab trade caravans, disregarding the truce in 1176 and again in 1182. King Baldwin IV was obligated to protect the realm from Saladin through successful engagements. Following these events, Reynaud solicited forgiveness from Baldwin IV. In 1183, Reynaud de Chatillon constructed 5 vessels and sailed into the Red Sea, intending to destroy Mecca. He never succeeded in reaching Mecca. His naval fleet was defeated by Saladin's ships, and Reynaud himself escaped by retreating. Saladin advanced his forces toward Carac and commenced a siege of de Chatillon's stronghold. It was only the prompt arrival of King Baldwin IV with his army that spared Reynaud from certain demise. Upon Baldwin V's passing, his 7-year-old nephew, Baldwin V, ascended to the throne, though actual authority resided with the young king's stepfather, Guy de Lusignan. John V died a year later, and Guy de Lusignan was crowned the King of Jerusalem. Reynaud de Chatillon became his close associate. Towards the close of 1186, another Arab merchant caravan was traversing near Carac, and Reynaud swiftly moved to intercept it. The chronicler William of Tyre recorded that Saladin's sister was part of this caravan, and she was taken captive by Reynaud. For this transgression, Saladin vowed personal retribution against the knight. In the spring of 1187, Saladin, leading an army of 40,000 soldiers, invaded the kingdom of Jerusalem. He plundered Reynaud de Chatillon's estates and then advanced into Galilee, where he routed the Templars at the Battle of Crescent and initiated a siege of the city of Tiberias. Guy de Lusignan mobilized his own army and rapidly moved to confront the Muslim forces. The majority of the nobles advised the king against marching during the summer months, as the intended path led through the desert. They suggested instead that Jerusalem be fortified for defense. Nevertheless, Guy disregarded this counsel and commenced the campaign. He encountered Saladin's forces near the region known as the Horns of Hattin. The Muslims successfully lured the Crusaders into an ambush, depriving them of access to water sources, setting the surrounding vegetation ablaze, and easily overcoming the depleted Crusader contingent. King Guy de Lusignan, along with his brother, was taken prisoner. Reynaud de Chatillon was also captured and was immediately put to death. Subsequently, Saladin proceeded northward, capturing the territories of the Principality of Antioch and the county of Tripoli. He deferred the conquest of their principal cities and hastened his advance towards Jerusalem. En route, his troops seized all the cities within the kingdom with the exception of Tyre. The defense of Jerusalem was spearheaded by the knight Bouillon of Ibelin. He successfully repelled assaults on the city until, on the 9th day of the siege, the city's fortifications finally succumbed. Even then, Bouillon maintained his position, preventing the Muslims from entering the city. At that juncture, Saladin proposed a settlement through negotiation. The involved parties reached an agreement. The Christian inhabitants would be limited to depart the city upon payment of a ransom, averaging 10 dinars per individual. The city would then transition to Muslim control. In this narrative, Patriarch Heraclius again drew attention for his questionable actions, as he misappropriated church funds that had been earmarked for the ransom of the Christians. Concurrently, Saladin, whether motivated by generosity or a desire to expel the Christians from the city, contributed 100,000 dinars to the Christian residents of Jerusalem to aid them in securing their freedom. It was only after a month had passed, when the final contingent of Christians, led by Bouillon himself, departed the city, that Saladin assumed dominion over Jerusalem. By that point, approximately 10,000 Christians remained within the city walls. Unable to furnish the required ransom, they were subsequently enslaved. The Christian loss of Jerusalem was regarded as a devastating event throughout Europe. Some interpreted it as divine retribution, while others commenced preparations for the Third Crusade. Three principal Huron monarchs would spearhead this crusade: King Richard I, the Lionheart of England, King Philip II Augustus of France, and Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. This military expedition would become one of the most renowned in the annals of the Crusades. The fall of Jerusalem to non-Christian forces was viewed as a terrible disaster across Europe. Certain individuals interpreted it as a consequence of divine retribution, while others started making plans for a new crusade. Three highly influential European monarchs would spearhead this holy expedition: King Richard I, known as the Lionheart, of England, King Philip II, also called Augustus, of France, and Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. This military endeavor would ultimately be remembered as one of the most notable in the entire history of the Crusades.